Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and in this one, we're going to be talking about Hydra Captain America, or Hydra Cap for short. This was what I consider, anyways, to be an extremely unpopular story that Marvel Comics did. And in my humble opinion, would be a long line of unpopular things that they did. It was so unpopular, by the way, this sort of era of Marvel, that at one point people were complaining to a writer, and on Twitter he literally told them to drown in hobo piss, which very classy, dude. Very classy. Um, but So Marvel had been making fans angry, and they developed a adversarial attitude with their fans where, they would give you a story where, first of all, if someone would pitch them an idea like, I want to be true to the character, I just want to write the best Captain America comics ever, but it's going to be status quo. Like Marvel would shoot that guy down. And at one point, one of the editors at Marvel literally said, when you're pitching me story ideas, I am going to reject anything that wouldn't quote unquote break the internet. And Hydra Cap for sure broke the internet. And so the gist of the story, and this is kind of multiple stories that all sort of blend together. And I cannot stand this era, so you'll have to excuse me for not being more knowledgeable than I am. But the gist, as I understand it, is Captain America had lost his powers, and then his age caught up with him, and he was an old man, which is the whole reason why Falcon became Captain America, I guess. And so they wanted to make Cap young again, and they decided to bring in a cosmic cube to accomplish this. The cosmic cube becomes sentient. It looks like a little girl. I think its name was Kobik or something like that. Red Skull kind of takes her aside and tells her that Hydra is the good guys. So the cosmic cube somehow rewrites reality so that now Steve Rogers had grown up where he was recruited into Hydra as a kid, and his best friend as a kid was some big Hydra dude, and so on and so forth, right? So he's this Manchurian candidate. He's a sleeper agent. And so finally, when he reveals himself, he throws somebody out of a helicopter. I can't remember if it was Bucky or who it was, but he throws somebody out of a helicopter and says, Hail Hydra. And it's this big moment where people lost their mind when they saw that, right? And people heard about it and didn't like it. And Marvel just started to lie and tell everybody how this was going to be permanent. This is how it is from now on, da 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 da. And from what I've heard, I mean, even saying it was a lie is a little bit arguable because some people say that this was always meant to be a temporary thing, right? And then Marvel was kind of laughing at people who would like actually believe their promises, which is a pretty messed up thing to do, in my opinion, right? Like if I'm going to promise something, I'm going to try my hardest to keep my promise. So this thing of them thinking that you trusting them is literally laughable is screwed up, right? But point being, supposedly it was always supposed to be temporary, but they told people it wasn't. People got upset that Captain America, who is he is the moral linchpin of the Marvel universe. I've kind of talked about this before, but he is a aspirational hero, right? And the whole point of Captain America is to basically be without blame. And it's so that other characters can react to him. So that if you have somebody like, say, Peter Parker, who's a cathartic motivational hero, he is going to see Steve Rogers as the ideal that he strives to be like. And granted, Peter Parker, who I like more than Captain America personally, he's never going to get there, right? But that's not the point. It's not the destination, it's the journey. I could do a whole video about aspirational heroes, but the point is, it it makes no sense to do this with the character of Steve Rogers. It makes no sense for all those moments over the years where he could do something like lift Thor's hammer, because the whole deal with the hammer is, only those who are worthy can do that, so on and so forth, right? It was such a stupid idea. It really was. So, so at any rate, the fans hated it. And at the end of the day, Marvel undid it. And Marvel needed yet another reminder that they're trying to sell things to the fans. So maybe don't call the fans names and tell them to drown in hobo piss. Not a fantastic way to run a business, believe it or not. I know that might be a shocker, but yeah. So, also, in my humble opinion, not a fantastic basis for a role playing game. So, we didn't do that. And that's kind of why I'm not more upset about knowing the specifics, because at this point in our game, we have long since cared about what the comics were doing anymore, right? We care about the old school comics. We actually care about the characters themselves. We want to uphold their legacies, things like that, that actual Marvel employees don't necessarily care about. So we're doing our own thing. And something we do, though, is we will see something like this that is notorious, and we'll decide to reference it somehow, just not the same way. And at the risk of sounding like a jerk, I feel like what we do kind of makes more sense and is kind of the better way to do it, right? So we came up with a much more simple thing, which is that Hydra clones Captain America. That's it. Um, and so we had already done a story with Arnim Zola, and Arnim Zola in our game can, first of all, download a mind out of a body into a digital format, which we kind of see in the Marvel movies, where his mind is in like a an old sort of cassette punk computer system at like an abandoned, what was that, a Shield facility? I can't remember if it was like Shield or Hydra or what it was. I want to say it was Shield, and they were doing like an Operation Paperclip thing with him, where they were like forcing him to work for America against his will. But at any rate, it doesn't matter. The point is his mind was in a machine, right? So that's a thing he can do. And then in the comics and stuff, it also says he's a master of cloning technology. So between those two things, then we had been doing this campaign, this Avengers campaign, where Hydra was sort of the reoccurring villains we were seeing. And specifically, they were using a lot of cloning technology. Something else I should mention, because it's going to come up in a future adventure soon, is they were working with AIM. And whereas the two groups, um, I wouldn't say they get along exactly. There's certainly no risk of them merging into one group anytime soon, but they are willing to trade little bits of technology here and there, so on and so forth. And so this also is going to lead into a big AIM story we're getting ready to cover on the channel, where AIM clones the Avengers. But I'll talk about that later. That's for another day. So the point is, in our game, they've got Hydra Cap. He's a clone of the original Steve Rogers, right? And like I say all the time, in our game, we do real time. So our Steve Rogers was running around in World War II doing stuff. Um, he got thawed out of ice in the 1960s. In the 1970s, he got married to uh, Sharon Carter. not Peggy Carter, because I had never even heard of Peggy Carter until the first Captain America movie. And so we already had our Cap married off long before that. But at any rate, so our Cap marries Sharon Carter, and then they have a daughter named Shannon, who is American Dream, who we saw in the Spider-Girl comics that Marvel published around the year 2000, give or take a bit. And so then she gave birth to a son who she named after her father. So this kid is Steve Rogers II, and now he is our current Captain America in the game. So when I say Hydra Cap is a clone of Steve Rogers, I don't mean he's a clone of this kid. This is a clone of this kid's grandfather. And so the way we played this off was this kid is he feels a lot of pressure to live up to the legacy of Captain America, right? Like those are big shoes to fill. And so when Hydra Cap shows up, Hydra Cap is kind of trying to take advantage of this. So he's telling the kid, like, you don't measure up. You know, you're a pale imitation of your grandfather. You like your grandfather would be ashamed of how pathetic you are, you know. And of course, the whole time he's bashing the kid with a shield and, you know, so on and so forth. And to be clear, in case anybody's wondering, honestly, we just took the Captain America character sheet from Marvel Superheroes by TSR, and we just printed off two of those and we gave it to each player. And this was a player versus player thing. Um, so the Hydra Cap ended up being the better fighter because we said that Arnim Zola could isolate memories and stuff like that, and he had given the bad one all of the fighting experience of Captain America without any of the morals or, you know, the good things, right? But he had that fighting level. And then the kid was not quite there yet, you know, because he doesn't have anybody else's fighting experience. He is just he's still young, he's still learning, you know, all of this stuff. So he lost, actually. The bad guy won. But then we had the Avengers show up. They fight Hydra Cap. And Hydra Cap did an amazing job of holding his own. I was kind of shocked at how well it worked. And we had some arguments too about things like Hydra Cap has vibranium in his shield. And I remember the one player thought that vibranium could absorb energy. And another player thought it had to be kinetic only. And so it got into Thor's lightning, right? And whether or not that could actually fry the person holding the shield. Um, we ended up going back and forth on that for a while, and we settled on the idea that the shield is immune to the lightning. We just thought that made more sense in terms of kind of like how comic books are written. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, by the way, if anybody can knows of a comic issue or something to the contrary, drop it in the comments section. I'd love to hear it. And then we can always change how we run it next time. You know what I mean? And anytime I do something like that where maybe physics is wonky for a minute, we kind of blame it on stuff like Scarlet Witch and her probability control. You know, we're saying she alters reality fields around her and stuff like that. So that kind of can explain away the little faux pas when it comes to the rules. But at any rate, Hydra Cap ultimately is forced to retreat because he is slightly overwhelmed by the entire Avengers team, which was just ridiculous to me. I thought they would have beaten him much easier than they did, but he really held out for a long time. And then he gets away. And so now at Hydra, we've got Hydra Cap is like a major Hydra villain now. Clone Red Skull was created by Arnim Zola. He's running the whole show. And then, of course, Arnim Zola himself is still hanging around. And I mentioned this before, but I feel like it bears repeating. He's got, at this point, his mind in the Hydra computer system. and he is running multiple bodies simultaneously. And these bodies look like his old school classic Jack Kirby body, right? And I like to joke about where his head should be. There's like a little camera thing there, and I always call it his robot cheeseburger. Um, just to me, it's got like layers. It reminds me of a cheeseburger. But at any rate, that's what the Arnim Zolas look like. I know he's undergone a lot of reimaginings over the years, and I would just rather pay tribute to Jack Kirby. You know what I mean? I feel like Kirby's stuff is better than any of the other versions they've come up with over the years. But that's it for this one. That was the Hydra Cap adventure. And he's a recurring villain, so he's still around. He can still be a problem. Um, yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. So, as always, thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the channel, we would love it if you were to hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed, and as always, leave a comment. And from everybody here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.